for years, Aubrey O'Day stayed silent while the world kept asking the same question: why won't she speak? Every time Diddy Kane's name appeared in headlines, people expected Aubrey to step forward. Fans assumed she was waiting for the right deal. Critics thought she was avoiding the conversation. But what most people didn't realize was that Aubrey had already been asked to speak many times, and she kept saying no. Behind the scenes, her phone never stopped ringing. Documentary filmmakers, streaming platforms, and production companies all wanted the same thing: her story. They framed it as empowerment, as justice, as finally being heard. Some promised full creative control. Others promised massive exposure. The kind of exposure most people would never walk away from. And yet, Aubrey did, again and again. She refused to sit in front of the camera, refused to relive the past, and refused to let her name be used as a selling point. To outsiders, it didn't make sense. Why turn down so many opportunities when public interest was at its peak? Why stay quiet when everyone else seemed ready to talk? But Aubrey knew something most people didn't. She understood how quickly a story like hers could be twisted. She had lived through reality television. She had watched moments get edited, emotions get exaggerated, and narratives get shaped to fit an agenda. And she wasn't willing to let that happen again. What made her hesitation even more unusual was the timing. These offers didn't come slowly. They came all at once, almost aggressively, as if the industry sensed blood in the water and rushed to take advantage of the moment. That alone made Aubrey uncomfortable. When people move that fast, it usually means they're chasing impact, not truth. And the more she listened, the more she felt like her pain was being treated as content. For Aubrey, this wasn't about fame. She had already experienced what fame could cost. This was about control, about trust, about knowing that once she spoke, she couldn't take her words back. She needed to know that whoever told her story would treat it with care, not urgency, with respect, not spectacle. Then something unexpected happened. One conversation stood out from all the others. There was no rush, no pressure, no grand promises, just listening. And for the first time in years, Aubrey paused. Not because she was convinced, but because she felt safe enough to consider it. And the reason wasn't money. For a long time, Aubrey O'Day felt like she was being watched, not listened to. The moment she began speaking more openly, even in small ways, everything shifted. According to Aubrey, it was almost instant. Producers who had never shown interest before suddenly wanted meetings. Filmmakers reached out with urgency. Streaming platforms circled at the same time. It felt coordinated, like everyone had been waiting for permission to move. And once the door cracked open, they all rushed in together. She later described it as being offered the world. Big promises came fast. Money was mentioned early. Creative control was emphasized. Some people told her she could finally clear her name. Others framed it as a chance to expose someone powerful. The offers sounded tempting, especially with public attention growing by the day. From the outside, it looked like the perfect moment to speak. The demand was there, and so was the platform. But for Aubrey, the speed of it all was unsettling. What bothered her most wasn't just how many offers came in, but how quickly they came. These weren't slow, thoughtful conversations. Many people seemed to already know what kind of documentary they wanted to make before they ever spoke to her. They weren't asking questions to understand her experience. They were pitching narratives. That made her pause. Aubrey had spent years in environments where stories were shaped in editing rooms, not lived realities. She recognized the pattern immediately. She noticed how often urgency was used as pressure. People told her the moment would pass if she didn't act now, that the public would move on, that someone else would tell the story first. But Aubrey didn't want to rush something this serious. She knew once she said yes, she would be opening doors she might not be able to close again. And if the story was mishandled, she would be the one living with the consequences, not the producers. So instead of agreeing, she slowed everything down. She began listening more closely, not to the promises, but to what was missing. She paid attention to how people reacted when she asked about process, about boundaries, about who would have final say. Some conversations ended quickly after that. Others became uncomfortable. That told her everything she needed to know. Her instinct kept telling her something felt off. It wasn't fear. It was familiarity. She had felt this before, back when cameras followed her every move and moments were turned into entertainment. She didn't want her pain reduced to sound bites or cliffhangers. She wanted to be sure that if she spoke, It would be on her terms. Turning down so many offers wasn't easy. People around her questioned the decision. Some thought she was missing her chance, but Aubrey trusted herself. She believed that the right opportunity wouldn't feel rushed or desperate. It would feel intentional. And as she continued saying no, she started asking deeper questions, because if she was going to speak at all, she needed to know exactly who she was speaking to. As Aubrey continued to turn down offers, she started noticing patterns that made her even more uneasy. On the surface, many of these documentary projects claimed they wanted the truth. They used words like exposure, accountability, and justice. But the more she listened, the more she felt that truth wasn't really the goal. What many of these teams seemed to want was impact, something dramatic, shocking, and fast. Aubrey later described it as people wanting to make a hit piece, not a careful or honest story. And that distinction mattered deeply to her. A hit piece, in her eyes, doesn't leave room for complexity. It doesn't care about how events unfolded over time or how power dynamics affect behavior. It looks for a clear villain and a clean narrative. Aubrey didn't feel comfortable being part of something like that. Her experiences were layered and painful, not something that could be reduced to a single storyline. She worried that if the focus was only on destruction, her own voice would be lost in the noise. One issue stood out more than any other during these conversations: representation. As Aubrey asked questions about who was involved behind the scenes, she noticed a serious lack of black representation in production and editing roles. This wasn't something she could ignore. To her, this wasn't about checking boxes or appearances. It was about understanding culture. She believed that stories rooted in black music, black power structures, and black industry spaces cannot be told accurately without people who have lived inside that world. Aubrey felt that without that lived experience, key details would be misunderstood or overlooked. The subtle power dynamics, the unspoken rules, the pressure young artists feel when their future depends on one powerful figure. She feared that without the right voices shaping the narrative, her story would be oversimplified or framed in ways that didn't reflect reality. And once a documentary is released, there's no taking it back. This realization became a breaking point for her. Even if a project offered money or visibility, she couldn't move forward without trust. And trust, for her, meant knowing the people telling the story understood where it came from. When she didn't see that, her confidence disappeared. She began to feel that many of these documentaries were more interested in using her experience than protecting her. So she kept saying no, not because it was easy, but because it felt necessary. She accepted that people might not understand her decision. Some might even criticize it. But Aubrey knew she had already lived through situations where her voice was edited, controlled, and reshaped. She wasn't willing to repeat that experience under a different name. By this point, she had almost convinced herself that no documentary would ever feel right. That maybe silence was safer than risking another loss of control. And just as she was ready to walk away completely, one final call came in, and this time, the tone was different. That final call didn't feel like any of the others. It wasn't rushed. It didn't come with deadlines or ultimatums. When Alexandria Stapleton reached out, Aubrey immediately noticed the difference. From the first conversation, Alex wasn't trying to impress her with flashy promises or big budgets. She wasn't trying to sell a story before hearing it. Instead, she asked questions that mattered, about boundaries, safety, and how Aubrey wanted her story to be shared. For someone who had spent years feeling unheard, that approach was almost shocking. Aubrey later described Alex as patient, human, and genuinely listening. Not just hearing the words, but really understanding the weight behind them. For the first time, Aubrey didn't feel like she was a character in someone else's narrative. She felt like a person whose experiences were being respected. Every question Alex asked was thoughtful. Every concern Aubrey raised was acknowledged. This wasn't reality TV chaos. This wasn't pressure to produce moments that would trend on social media. It was intentional, deliberate, and considerate. Another thing that made Netflix stand out was time. Unlike other projects that had rushed her or tried to force urgency, Netflix and Alex were willing to slow down. They wanted to take the time to get things right. Aubrey noticed how carefully they considered every element of the documentary, not just what would make viewers click, but what would reflect the truth of her experiences. That willingness to prioritize integrity over speed helped Aubrey feel secure. She could see that the goal wasn't just a headline. It was documenting a real story, in a way that would honor her voice and her perspective. As conversations continued, Aubrey began to feel a shift inside herself. After years of being cautious and hesitant, she slowly began to let her guard down. She realized that for the first time, the people asking her to speak actually cared about how she felt, not just what she could deliver for the cameras. She trusted that they would represent her story accurately, without twisting it for drama or shock value. That trust was something she hadn't felt with other offers, no matter how tempting they appeared. Eventually, Aubrey agreed to participate, not because of money or exposure, but because she finally felt safe enough to share her story. She understood the risk. Speaking publicly about such a sensitive and personal past isn't easy, but she also realized that this time, she could do it on her own terms. She could speak without pressure, without manipulation, and without losing control over how her experiences were presented. But what Aubrey shared in the documentary didn't start with Netflix, and it didn't start with the call from Alexandria. Her story goes further back, decades earlier, to a moment that would shape everything that followed. Before she could explain why she chose to finally speak, viewers needed to understand where it all began, with her first steps into the world of making the band, the environment she entered, and the people she trusted at the time. In 2004, Aubrey O'Day was just a college student with big dreams, unaware of how quickly her life was about to change. She auditioned for MTV's Making the Band 3, hoping to break into the music industry and chase a career she had been working toward for years. At the time, Sean "Diddy" Combs was already a towering figure in music, a man whose influence could make or break careers overnight. For a young artist like Aubrey, entering his world was both thrilling and intimidating. On the surface, it was an opportunity of a lifetime, fame, a platform, and a chance to work with one of the most successful producers in history. But the reality behind the cameras was far more complicated than anyone watching could imagine. Once she joined the show, Aubrey quickly realized just how intense the environment could be. Decisions about her future, her career, and even her role in the group were ultimately in the hands of someone else. Diddy controlled not just the music and the image, but the direction of her life in ways she didn't fully understand at the time. The power imbalance was clear from the start, though it didn't feel so obvious in the excitement of performing on stage and appearing on television. Fame came quickly, but it came with strings attached. Eventually, Aubrey was placed in the girl group Danity Kane, a project designed to showcase talent but also tightly managed by Diddy. While the spotlight gave her fame and recognition, it also brought intense scrutiny and pressure. The kind of decisions made behind the scenes weren't always transparent, and young artists like Aubrey often had little say. She now reflects on moments from that time as predatory behavior, describing situations where boundaries felt blurred and power was used in ways that left her feeling unsafe. At the time, she didn't have the language to fully describe what she was experiencing. It was confusing, stressful, and isolating. Despite the glamour and excitement, the environment demanded compliance. Choices weren't always presented as options, and speaking up often felt impossible. When one person holds so much influence over your career, your voice can feel powerless. Aubrey has since explained that this dynamic shaped her experience in ways that stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. It affected not only her career but her sense of self, her confidence, and her trust in the people around her. The combination of sudden fame, strict control, and blurred boundaries made the situation difficult to navigate. Aubrey has said that she tried to adapt, learning quickly which behaviors were tolerated and which could jeopardize her place in the group. Every decision carried weight, every misstep could be amplified, and every interaction could be misinterpreted. What viewers saw on TV was only a small fraction of the pressure she experienced behind the scenes. And according to Aubrey, things escalated fast. Moments that might have seemed minor to outsiders began to have lasting consequences, shaping not only her career trajectory but her personal sense of safety. The experiences she had during this period set the stage for the challenges, allegations, and decisions she would later share in the documentary, a story that goes far beyond what anyone saw on television and reveals the hidden pressures young artists face in high-stakes industries. Years after her time on Making the Band and Danity Kane, Aubrey O'Day says the challenges she faced didn't end with fame or stage lights. According to her, the dynamic between her and Sean "Diddy" Combs shifted in ways that made her feel unsafe and deeply uncomfortable. She claims that inappropriate advances were made toward her, advances she says she rejected firmly. These were personal, private, and deeply disturbing, and she has shared them as part of her account in the documentary, always framing them as her lived experience rather than legal conclusions. Aubrey describes receiving messages and communications that she found sexual in nature, some of which included images she says were explicit. While these allegations remain unverified in court, she has explained that the emotional weight of receiving them was significant. They created an environment where she felt constantly on edge, unsure how to respond without jeopardizing her career. For a young artist, caught between ambition and the fear of being labeled difficult or ungrateful, this balance was nearly impossible to maintain, according to Aubrey. After she rejected these advances, her position in Danity Kane changed. She claims that the group's trajectory shifted in ways that were unfavorable to her. Suddenly, opportunities that had been open before seemed to vanish. Decisions about touring, recording, and public appearances reportedly began to leave her out. While she doesn't present this as proven retaliation, she describes the timing as significant enough to make her question the motives behind her removal. The impact went beyond professional setbacks. Aubrey has said that being removed from the group in this way made her feel isolated and powerless. She had spent years building her career, learning how to navigate a competitive industry, and working under intense pressure, and then, suddenly, she felt replaced and disregarded. That sense of vulnerability stayed with her long after she left Danity Kane, shaping how she approached the music industry and any offers that came afterward. These experiences, she explains, were not just about career consequences, they were deeply personal. Rejecting someone with enormous power over your future came with risks she had to weigh carefully. Speaking out publicly could mean being labeled ungrateful or dramatic, yet staying silent meant carrying the trauma alone. That tension is part of why Aubrey stayed quiet for so long. Sharing these allegations in the Netflix documentary was a turning point for her. It allowed her to describe the environment she experienced without condensing it into headlines or viral clips. She could tell her story in full, contextualizing her experiences in ways she never could during her time on reality television or in the immediate aftermath of her departure from the group. She was able to explain how decisions, actions, and behavior intersected in a way that shaped not only her career but her personal life. And yet, even with all this detail, she emphasizes that this is her account, a personal truth, shared carefully and thoughtfully. It is not a legal verdict. It is the story of how a young artist navigated ambition, boundaries, and power, and the consequences she faced for standing up for herself. But one moment in the documentary stunned viewers even more than these claims, bringing the weight of her experiences into sharp relief. One of the most intense and emotionally charged moments in the documentary comes when Aubrey O'Day reads an affidavit from a third party, recounting something that allegedly happened in a recording studio years earlier. According to the affidavit, the witness claims to have observed an incident in 2005 that involved Aubrey and Sean Diddy Combs, along with another individual whose identity remains undisclosed. Aubrey presents this account in the documentary not as a legal conclusion, but as part of the story being shared, a perspective she felt was essential to fully understanding the environment she navigated. The moment is devastating because it forces the viewer to confront not just what happened, but how deeply private experiences can intersect with public life. Aubrey's voice as she reads the affidavit is steady, but the emotional weight is undeniable. She has said in interviews that reliving these memories, even to read them aloud, was incredibly difficult. It wasn't just about the words on the page, it was about remembering how powerless she felt, how the pressures of fame and ambition made it impossible to speak up at the time. The studio, which should have been a space for creativity and growth, became an arena of fear and confusion, a place where boundaries were crossed and trust was betrayed. By including this in the documentary, Aubrey made a conscious choice to share something that had remained private for years. The affidavit represents a perspective beyond her own, which lends the scene a chilling authenticity. It isn't framed as proof in a court of law, it's framed as testimony, an account that adds dimension and context to the story she has been building through interviews, memories, and personal reflections. This careful framing is part of why she trusted Alexandria Stapleton and Netflix. They allowed her to present it in a way that felt honest without sensationalizing it. The audience response to this section was immediate. Many viewers described it as shocking and hard to watch, not because it was presented sensationally, but because it felt real and human. It highlights the consequences of power dynamics in high-stakes industries, showing how young artists can feel trapped when someone with authority over their careers also violates trust. Aubrey herself has said that sharing this account publicly was one of the hardest things she's ever done, but she believed it was necessary. Omitting it would have left the story incomplete, and silencing herself again was not an option. This moment also underscores why timing and context matter. The affidavit is presented years after the alleged incident, at a point when the broader legal and cultural landscape had shifted. Its inclusion helps viewers understand the long-lasting impact of these experiences, and how Aubrey's personal journey intertwined with the rise, influence, and legal troubles of Sean Combs. All of this comes to light just as Diddy's legal world was collapsing, setting the stage for revelations that went far beyond individual allegations. The weight of the studio story amplifies the significance of the documentary, reminding viewers that behind headlines and court cases are real people navigating fear, ambition, and the complexities of power. The release of the Netflix documentary coincided with one of the most pivotal moments in Sean Diddy Combs' legal saga. By the time Aubrey's story aired, the public had already been following a complex series of allegations, courtroom proceedings, and high-profile media coverage. In July 2025, Diddy faced a mixed verdict in his trial, ultimately being convicted on 2 counts related to transportation for prostitution. Later, he was sentenced to roughly 4 years in prison. For many viewers, the timing of the documentary made every revelation feel even more immediate and intense, as it coincided with real-world consequences for a figure who had long been untouchable in the public eye. Aubrey O'Day made a conscious choice not to testify during the trial. While some may have expected her to step forward as a witness, she prioritized her inner peace and emotional well-being over the courtroom drama. Testifying would have meant reliving traumatic experiences in a legal setting, facing cross-examination, and potentially having her credibility questioned in front of the world. By staying out of the trial, Aubrey retained control over her story, choosing when, how, and to what extent she would share her experiences publicly. This decision underscores one of the central themes of the documentary, agency. In a world where she had once been under someone else's control, Aubrey reclaimed her voice on her own terms. The juxtaposition of the documentary release with Diddy's legal developments gave the story a heightened resonance. Every anecdote, every recollection of power imbalance, and every allegation Aubrey shared carried extra weight against the backdrop of the courtroom verdict. Viewers could see the connections between past behavior and present consequences, without the documentary itself serving as a courtroom judgment. Netflix and Alexandria Stapleton took care to present these stories as part of a larger historical and cultural context, not as evidence in a trial. This allowed Aubrey to speak openly while maintaining the integrity of the narrative. The fallout from the documentary extended beyond public attention. Fans and critics alike debated her role, her experiences, and her decisions regarding speaking out. Some praised her courage and thoughtfulness, highlighting the importance of choosing when and how to share personal experiences. Others were captivated by the timing, connecting the dots between the allegations in the documentary and the legal outcomes for Diddy. For Aubrey, the response reinforced the idea that telling her story thoughtfully and with context mattered far more than chasing headlines or sensational reactions. Importantly, the documentary also highlighted the long-term effects of these experiences on young artists navigating the music industry. It showed how power can be abused, how opportunities can come with hidden costs, and how courage isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it's about strategic, thoughtful decisions made to protect yourself. For Aubrey, this was a moment of reclaiming control over her narrative, sharing her truth in a way that could educate, illuminate, and empower others without putting her at additional risk. And now, as the trial concluded and the documentary lives on, fans and critics alike are left asking the same question Aubrey herself has faced for years: what comes next? How does someone navigate the fallout of public scrutiny, legal consequences, and personal trauma when the world is watching? The answer remains uncertain, leaving a reflective tension that lingers even after the credits roll. For Aubrey O'Day, participating in the Netflix documentary wasn't about revenge, publicity, or retribution. It wasn't about making headlines or proving a point to the world. Instead, it was about integrity, telling her story on her own terms, in a way that honored her experiences without distortion or sensationalism. After years of being cautious, of watching opportunities come and go, of being presented with offers that felt rushed, exploitative, or shallow, she finally found a platform she could trust. That trust, more than anything else, made her decision possible. From the very first conversation with Alexandria Stapleton, Aubrey realized this project was different. Alex listened, validated her experiences, and created space for her to express herself fully. Netflix, as a platform, demonstrated patience and care, showing a willingness to take time rather than chasing clicks or controversy. That combination of respect, intentionality, and support gave Aubrey confidence that her story would not be distorted, that it would be treated as history, not gossip. This was the environment she needed to finally speak. Throughout the documentary, Aubrey shares moments that were difficult, private, and deeply personal. From her early days on making the band to the experiences that followed with Danity Kane, and through the allegations and challenges she faced, she reveals a story shaped by ambition, power dynamics, and courage. By sharing these experiences in such detail, she allows viewers to understand the complexities of her journey. She shows that courage isn't just about standing up in the moment. Sometimes, it's about choosing the right time, trusting the right people, and speaking with care even with the legal consequences for Sean Combs and the attention her story has received. Aubrey's participation in the documentary remains thoughtful rather than reactive. She didn't aim to capitalize on public interest or legal drama. She prioritized telling the story accurately and with emotional honesty. In doing so, she highlights the broader context of power, culture, and personal boundaries within the music industry. Viewers see not just the events themselves, but the environment, the pressures, and the decisions that shaped her life and career. The documentary also leaves open questions. Will Aubrey speak again publicly about her experiences? Will she continue to share lessons learned or new insights into her journey? She hasn't promised answers, and that ambiguity reinforces the reflective tone of her story. Her narrative is a reminder that reclaiming your voice is a process, not a single moment, and that timing, trust, and intention matter as much as what is said. Ultimately, the doc matters to Aubrey because it restores control that she lost early in her career. It allows her to frame her experiences in a way that is authentic, respectful, and accurate. It shows the world that telling your story isn't just about exposure, it's about finding the people, the context, and the platform that honor your voice. And in that careful, intentional storytelling, she leaves viewers with something profound, a chance to reflect on power, accountability, and the courage it takes to finally speak even after years of silence.